Much. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Can we get a roll call, please, Ann?
Member Dosty?
Here.
Member Downs?
Here.
Member Gary?
Here.
Member Hamady?
Here.
Member Johns? He is here. Member Leon?
Here.
Member Locke?
Present.
Member Newton?
Here.
Member Oliver? Not here. Member Wong?
Here.
Member Wright? It's not here. Okay.
Thank you, Ann, so much. We'll go ahead to line item number 3 and open it up for any public comments at this time. For anything that's not on the agenda, you have 3 minutes. All right, seeing that there's no public comment, I'll ask line number 4. Staff, is there any announcements or any committee announcements?
Yes, Member Gilbert has resigned from this task force. Moving out of the city.
Okay. Thank you so much. Looks like line number 5, we don't have any presentations, so that'll move us right along to line number 6, discussion of possible matters on this action. But before we get to that, before we start our discussion for line number 6.1, I just want to open the floor up just to have conversation. I know everyone possibly seen the council meeting at the beginning of the month and the decision that was made regarding the subcommittee accountability subcommittee report. And so I just want to give a couple of minutes to just have that discussion, not a complaint session, not to bash anyone, but just, reflect and share some thoughts. And then the next thing after we do that, how do we move forward, right? How do we take what we learned from that meeting, the information that was provided to us, and how do we move forward for a possible action to bring this back to council? So if anyone wants to take that time just to have an open dialogue, at this time, I would invite you to do so. If not, they'll go ahead and turn it over to the accountability subcommittee.
No, I'm sorry. I have some thoughts.
Okay.
And I'm sorry I can't get my video to work for some reason.
Okay.
But first of all, I just wanted to thank Member Downs and Member Locke. I think you did an excellent job presenting, and I also really appreciated that you brought some passion, because I think this is an issue that requires it. And I think the result had nothing to do with any failures on your part. And so, yeah, we can talk next steps. I guess that's, but for now, I just want to express my disappointment in our government. Our officials, I think, did not rise to the occasion. And the fact that some appear not to even understand the issue is disturbing. But as far as the substance of it, I just think I would just encourage everyone to, I think it was disheartening to watch, but I wouldn't, really make any major changes in our plans. I think that worst case, we can, look at new leadership in 2022, but I think one major takeaway I had, sorry for rambling, was that I got the feeling that some members were feigning, they wanted to make it about that they had questions that weren't answered, but I don't think that was really the issue. And so I encourage going forward, let's be clear, let's answer their questions. And then in a way we'll be calling their bluff, because I think they seem to be misunderstanding what we're proposing as an advisory body, but it's an oversight body. So they're getting hung up on what other advisory bodies do, but this is different. And so they claimed that they were concerned about the ambiguity of whether this body would actually be autonomous and have the right to make decisions. I don't think that's really their concern. I think their concern is that the body will have that autonomy, but I definitely encourage us to make it crystal clear that we will. And so just, the next time they won't be able to hide behind the issue of lack of information. We can make it abundantly clear exactly how powerful we wish this body to be. And then just lastly, I just wanted to express disappointment in member Jordan. He retreats behind, he's all about data. He's a data wonk, but he was the one, he just said like offhandedly, well, we all know that the police department can't get any smaller. They need all the funding they have. If they got any smaller, it wouldn't be safe. He didn't cite any facts or data for that. So, when people claim that they're about the data, really they mean they're about the data when it, supports their particular position. But there's a lot that they treat as a baseline given without any kind of data behind it. So I just want to encourage people again, not to take at face value that these people know what they're talking about, because they don't.
All right, thank you. Anyone else would like to make a quick comment before we get to the accountability subcommittee report? All right, I'll go ahead and turn it over to the accountability subcommittee. I'm going to go ahead and present your report.
Terrific. Brian, do you want to start us off? And I'm glad to come in behind you if you'd like.
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, please.
The most important thing that I want to say is we, as a subcommittee, feel like we want one thing, and that is we want to live in a place where no one is afraid of the police. That's the number one goal. And the only way, or the best way that we can accomplish that is by having the most powerful accountability commission as we can. That is my bottom line. I understand that that's the bottom line for the other subcommittee members, and I'm hoping that's the bottom line for this entire task force. So I wanted to make sure that I said that.
That's great. And I think that's a tremendous articulation of what holds us to it. Do you want me to go in and I can just quickly take you through some of the smaller changes? I think on the whole, like task force member Hamity suggested, we're trying to stick to what we think are the fundamental principles. And as Brian just articulated those, I would absolutely agree with those. And also to, build some ways of being responsive to some of the things that aren't as, as fundamental, but that do respond to questions that came up. So you got on your documents, you've got a proposed resolution as well as the memo. The memo also includes, just for your reference, the older memos and older resolutions so that you can directly compare. You can see the newer memo includes a longer section penned by us that reviews research and shows some of the authorities, and that speaks to a question that came out of the council meeting. We have in the memo also a discussion about the relationship to legal concerns as a way of asking the city attorney to weigh in on some questions, that had been raised, but perhaps not answers. And then a couple of fixes that are more in the realm of technical fixes. One of which, number 3, is about fixes to how to ensure. A question that surfaced was how can the resolution be written in a way that shows not just that the data will be requested, but received. And that's, I think, a good faith, way of improving and strengthening it, which we should welcome. And so we included some minor changes about that. There were also some questions about the moment of creation and the ambiguity about when its timing would be. And you see that we tried to address those by having its creation January 1 for the next calendar year, and then a 2-year term coinciding with the rest of them starting the year after that. Generally, commissions coincide with council terms, which start are 4-year terms, but because they alternate, the commissions are generally on 2-year appointments. So this would be for 1 year starting January 1, with the proviso that if the task force asked council for an extra 3 months, and if council granted it, then the commission would start March 1, so that that it basically is set that it'll start right as our task force ends. And it includes,
Remember, Dallas, real
Yes.
quick, pull the document up, just in case the audience,
Yeah, would you like me to share screen?
that would be great.
Okay. Here we go. Can you all see that?
We can, thank you.
Okay. So questions about the moment of creation. So this is the memo. You also have a separate one that is just the resolution. The resolution is unmarked, but the memo helps to give you some guidance through the resolution. And you can see the long explanation of concept that includes surveys as well of the literature, and surveys of some of the findings through research, as well as citations to the different places where people have defined the problem in Albany based on previous testimony, as a way of answering some of those questions about us defining the problem. And hopefully we have done that. On the responses to legal concerns, you can see this page here. And this is just a request within the memo to ask the city attorney to respond to, rather than stating the possibility of risk. How to minimize, sorry, I just sent it spinning, how to minimize risk, and how much risk is involved to state if there's also risk in not creating it, so that that this is counterbalanced, and what would be the risks, if any, of the model of the consultant model that we had approved versus an ombudsperson model that the city attorney mentioned, but if that model was one where it reported back to the commission. Stated about our openness that if it reports to the commission, if it's an ombudsperson but who reports to the commission, that this is, that then we're into kind of semantics about whether we're calling it an ombudsperson or a consultant. So that's not part of our resolution, but an explanation. Fixes to ensure data collection. So previously it said request and publicize. Now it says request and receive. This came from council member feedback during the meeting about ensuring that it would be received. And then we have report regularly to council on the data as a way of sort of codifying what we do with that. And then one about the timing. There's a couple of small things that I would add, and it may be that other members of the subcommittee, would want to also, that have come up in my own gathering of information since we submitted this. Would you like me to say these now or to wait?
Thank you so much. Let's unshare your screen and see if anyone has any questions before you move forward, if there's anything that anyone had concerns on. Let's see. All right, go ahead, finish your presentation.
All right, so there's a couple things that are not part of ours that I personally, we didn't, these are things that I've, come across but just that I personally would suggest adding a date. Let me actually stop this a second. Adding a date, and I'll just put it in a form that's available. Adding a date for the department to respond. So someone, one of the council members, when I reviewed, had asked about what timeliness was. And so I put, one suggestion was in a timely manner, generally within 30 days. Right now it says in a timely manner, and we can keep that, but with the generally within 30 days. Another question that I have heard that I think is a good faith one that we should think about responding to is building in the recommendation power. There's a bunch of things about request receive now, but just to build in clarity about make recommendations to council, into the, throughout the resolution in order to ensure that that's written into the powers of the commission and isn't something that's misunderstood later, that it's supposed to be not just receiving, but making recommendations. And to make the recommendation authority totally clear. So I've got some thoughts about where that could go. Let me go to this one. I loaded the wrong one. And here we go. So this is the resolution you have in front of you, and I've just added in red a couple of places. One of which is report regularly to council on the data and the department's responsiveness to data requests and make recommendations to council. Receive regular briefings, including department structures and staffing. That's just including a kind of general overview of things they'll be adding to the things we're getting briefing on. And report on those briefings with recommendations, just to ensure that that's built into it. So those are the areas that I would consider. Another one just to throw out there, because I know this came up and we can decide. We originally said, on the amount of information we receive would include the department members' city of residence. And this is something that came up in the meeting and whether we should consider making it county of residence. So it doesn't seem like we're targeting people, especially if people live in very small cities. These are things that have occurred to me in the period since we submitted this, but there's other things that we can consider as well. And it may be that other of the subcommittee members have things to suggest.
Great, thank you so much, Member Down. Does anyone have any questions, suggestions, anything you would like to interject in the report? All right, well, first let me go ahead and open it up for any public comments at this time. All right, go ahead, please. Go ahead and let him in, and we can do 3 minutes. It's fine.
Thank you. I probably don't need 3 minutes. I just wanted to say that I just had a question about the data that's collected that you would be getting from the police department. Does that, isn't included there? Maybe there's some law and some reason why, but I didn't see race or ethnicity or gender identity or whether somebody's LGBTQ plus or a person with disabilities. So I was just wondering if any of that data is collected or there's a reason not. And then I was wondering if somebody could clarify what actually happened at the council meeting. I tried to raise my hand earlier and didn't work. And I thought that it didn't pass, and I know everybody's acting like it didn't, but as you probably all know, Rochelle is saying it did. So I'm just wondering if anybody has any insights into that, because I'd like to know what's going on. And thank you very much for, I'm excited as this moves forward, whatever happens. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Nick, you're next. You're on mute.
Apologies, yeah, I had a little trouble getting my button. Thank you, Commission, for hearing my thoughts. My thoughts are a little bit general. I was very disappointed to see the article in the Chronicle, and I listened to the council meeting last night. I was not at the council meeting. I was out of town when this item was discussed. As someone who very much wants this work to move forward and who initiated this work in a way, I'm disappointed about the divisiveness that has come up, and I think I understand it. I think I understand some aspects of it, but I'm hoping that we can get past the divisiveness to concrete action and At the meeting last night, sorry, my thoughts are a little scattered. I was going to write them down, but I didn't have time. At the meeting last night, I felt like there was a bit of defensiveness on the part of the council. Having been there, I understand it, but I also understand that there appeared to be a lack of empathy there. And that much I know, and I can understand. And I can understand frustration with that lack of empathy. So I don't have much else to say at this point, except that I encourage each side, if you will. That's a wrong way to put it. We don't have sides here, but I encourage interpersonal communication between the commission members and the council members in order to better both understand each other and where they're coming from. I think there might be some misunderstanding on both sides, but if I can help in any way to with this misunderstanding, or with helping this work move forward, I would be glad to. Thank the commission very much for their work, and I hope moving forward, the council, which I believe also wants to move this work forward, can I don't know. This is very hard to do extemporaneously. I'm also hoping for better, at least presentation from the council, if not better action. I guess I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comment. Is there anyone else? All right, I'll bring it back to the task force. Chair, Member Downs, would you like to go ahead and address the first questions from Julie? I think she had a couple, or anyone. Feel free to do that.
I'm trying to remember. One was the disposition. You know, I've rewatched, and I do think the city council staff summary was accurate in terms of that it was sent back, you know, in terms of what the disposition was at not last night's meeting, but the council meeting before. So that's why we're trying to send it forward in a way that keeps the fundamentals, but does respond to some of the specific things. I think Julie asked about whether it's, I'll paraphrase it a little bit, that we don't specifically state on police stops. We say, you know, timely manner data on police stops. We don't specifically state all the forms of the data we want. I don't remember if this came up in this context, but we had a broader discussion at either our last meeting or 2 meetings ago about whether we're better off specifying all the details or with a broader generalization. And one you know, concern with including a list, you know, of more specific aspects of the data on traffic stops is that list could be read to be exclusive. So data on traffic stops could include those things. If we start listing, it may raise the question of whether anything we don't list, we've explicitly said we don't get. So I think that's a sort of a language question. Certainly my expectation is that the data on traffic stops, you know, that these requests, you know, it empowers to request and to receive, and that those requests from the commission would go into the categories that Julie mentioned, as well as others that might develop, but that we might not anticipate.
All right, thank you, Member Down. Member Hamady, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just had a question. One of the in the report, you know, sort of the key question they had was, it is unclear from the proposal whether the commission is intended to serve as all advisory bodies currently serve, which is to advise and make recommendations to the city council, or if the interest is that this commission is intended to have autonomy in decision making. So I apologize if you already made sort of specifically addressed that question, but I didn't see it, and I feel like that's like the real key thing is. I hope the answer to that is yes. That there is autonomy. This is not an advisory body because it's an oversight body. Either way, whether I'm, you know, we'll have to come to a consensus on that, and then I think we need to make that abundantly clear if it's not already.
Thank you. Chair Dawsey, go ahead.
A couple things. First, I think Julie was asking about the demographics of the police officers, that along with such as county of residence, why are things such as gender, race, not included? And to that, I would say that there hasn't been much difference documented in most studies. That there's not much of a correlation outside of if they are white nationalists, which is different. But maybe you have something else to address. Maybe you have a different response for that, Member Down.
I bet you are right in terms of, I bet you interpreted Julie's comment more accurately than I did. My understanding of what your sense of the research is the same as yours. The other thing I think we want to be thoughtful about is there are certain categories the city asks its employees but can't publicize. And so I know when we deal with EEO data, we have to make sure that we are careful not to be publicizing demographic data that they want to reveal. In other words, no one is required to publicize their sense of their race, ethnicity, or for that matter, gender. So we could ask for some general statistics, and even those would probably need to be generalizable enough that someone couldn't go through and identify. Because I know when we do include those general statistics on the city workforce as a whole, one of the points was that we needed to have a big enough number that no one could look and then say, I bet I can identify who has identified themselves as characteristic H or Y or Z.
Member Oliver?
Yeah, I have a question slash concern, which is that I'm curious if it's still true that we're recommending an advisory committee that's 5 people appointed by the council. If that is so, I would be interested in having a conversation about why it's appointed by the council versus elected, like an elected advisory committee, just autonomously not appointed. So that's my comment.
It's a good question. I know that last time it came up, a couple things that were circulated, one of which is the challenges of elections to this, where you can imagine the way it is that elections can be influenced by, say, if there were heavy outside spending by an interest group with a strong interest in the outcome of this. In other words, that it's not totally clear. I don't think that having them elected produces people who are more responsive to citizen or to public, questions, because it can open itself to outside spending to stack it. In that sense, it's something we want to be thoughtful about. The other argument I remember us talking about was that, the other, commissions that exist that have been created, various types have formats like this, which is a hybrid, 5 from council, 2 plus 2 from the Board of Ed. Not all of them have those extra 2, but SEJC does. And that if our hope was to narrow the issues toward the fundamentals of what are the powers of it, rather than to pull council support away on composition questions. But obviously that's a discussion for the whole task force.
Are there any other questions, concerns? Chair Dawsey, let's me get Member Long and then Chair Dawsey. Go ahead.
Well, one, thank you so much for all the work that you've been doing, Accountability Subcommittee. And I want to just applaud what Community Task Force members John said at the very beginning, that the work that we're trying to do is really, if we are trying to uphold, there shouldn't really be resistance, because what we're trying to highlight is a good police department. An accountability commission or oversight is only going to highlight, how do they exemplify that? So I just wanted to point that out. I did attend the city council meeting, not this last Monday, but the previous one. And I had some concerns. One, Councilmember Preston Jordan stated that he wasn't comfortable with the words public safety and accountability. And also, Councilmember McQuaid had suggested the Novato model as a possible option. And I see what you have written in the report, but I feel like the Novato model is not really an option at all. Not even with having the city council be the kind of the green light for any kind of accountability to be investigated. I did quickly look over the Novato model. It kind of has like, in case of this, there's an algorithm. But that to me it's not really an accountability model. And so I want to point that out. And if possible, I'd like, even though it's more work, I want to make it clear that it's really not an option. It's not really accountability.
We could totally strengthen. I can paste in, see if that works. I don't know. We don't have a chat, so I can't paste it in. But if you look on page 2 at the very bottom, there's a list of, in that paragraph, of the other mid-sized cities that have it. We did respond on our, sense of the limits of the Novato model. And if I understand Member Leung, it's the sentence that goes on to the top of page 3, to strengthen that sentence. Right now, it says that, we consider a model that circles back to the city manager, not to be oversight, that is keeping, and saying at least it should go to the city council. But we could, that final sentence before the break, which is a very long sentence, we could reword that to say that, in fact, the task force, even in that case, just doesn't consider Novato to be a model of accountability. And if it's okay with you all, the three of us could wordsmith that before we have to, since it's just in the covering memo, we don't have to necessarily vote to approve every wording of that. We could wordsmith that before the deadline to turn that into council.
Dulce, you had your hand was up.
Yeah. I'm agreeing very much with everything that's being said so far as well. I had 3 questions. One, shifting it to county, some of the concern is about police officers just not being from the same city, and if there's a difference if they are. And my understanding is that data sort of shows that if they're from the city, outcomes are better, but not significantly. But I'm not positive on that. Would we be able to have a county, if not in Albany? And if in Albany specifically saying that, or would that again verge into maybe then people could figure out who it is? So I just raised that. I don't know if you know the answer to that right now. So that's number 1. 2, what exactly the under the due process section, what the rights of civil servants means is not something that makes intuitive sense to me. Do civil servants have more rights than a community member? And if so, what specific rights? Because part of the issue is that police officers often get to have more rights in any kind of legal investigation than an average community member would. So I would want to, I'm curious what your thoughts were there and how you might tease that apart just to be super like clear about that. And then 3 was, yeah, about the ombudsperson, and how it might be if they're reporting to both the chief and the accountability committee, but they have to censor what they say to the accountability subcommittee, does that end up being that it is like a primary reporting to the chief? And do they end up with a split allegiance? How do you keep them independent? I'm not very familiar with ombuds people. It sounds like a bad idea, but that's just a reaction, and I don't know more about it. So I would like to hear more discussion of that as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let's see if I can make
Right.
sure, if it's okay, just so I've got them fresh, and if I forget one, Corey, let me know. So the section on the memo from due process is part of a summary of an overview of models. So that's, a summary Member Johns took to provide a sort of sense of an overview of models. So I don't think it's our statement of exactly what those are, but these are concerns that exist, or areas of discussion that exist within the literature. That's my memory of where, the whole section under an overview comes from. Comes from that. The question, it's not part of the resolution, so it is not, part of what we send forward. I've already lost the second one.
The city specifying Albany.
Oh, yeah. So could we think about a way of asking people to say what county, asking it to say what county they're in if it's not Albany? So county of residence, or basically we could ask to say, residential status within Albany, you like a yes, no, if that's your key question, or residential status within Albany and county of residence or something, seems like a way of, if your goal is to identify, if you're less worried about which specific municipality for non-Albany residents they live in, then that would be a way to get at the question, or 2 ways I could pick up to get at the question you ask. The ombudsperson would, depend on how council rewrites it. We don't include it as part of our resolution. We did include a response to it in the legal sections, and I think, my hope would be that it would follow as much as possible the consultant model, and if there was a reason to call that person an ombudsperson that fit within the consultant model, I don't object to the name if that was the city attorney's suggestion of the ombudsperson in place of the commission, that I personally would strongly object to, but our resolution continues to call from the consultant model we laid out before.
I guess my concern was that the memo didn't sound strong enough, maybe, about ombudsperson being really not ideal. If it reduces risk, we do support it. It would have to be like this, but it's a reasonable solution, which is not what I'm hearing from you here. So I'm just raising that.
Yeah, we could certainly, tighten that up along with the section member Leong did before we send it forward. Along with the section member Leong had asked us to tighten up on Novato before we send it forward.
Right. Looks like we have one comment, and so I'll listen to a couple of comments rather. I'll open it up for 2 minutes and go from there. Go ahead, Margie.
Sorry, Mayor. You're allowing public comment again for this item. I was advised by the city attorney, if it's for the same item, we have to allow the same amount of time.
That's fine. 3 minutes is fine.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, this is Margie Marks. I want to thank all of you for the work you're doing. As an Albany resident, I'm so grateful to see this work going on. When the city had the listening sessions, there were some youth that called in, and there were parents of youth that called in that had experiences with the Albany police. And I think it would be really important to get a youth to be part of this accountability, so you get that perspective of how they feel like they're being treated. Not that it's all negative, you know, there's positive too, but I would really like you to consider having the Board of Education appoint, and I think and you need to specify, it needs to be a youth in Albany to serve on this accountability commission, because the youth are affected by the police also and have different experiences than adults have. So please consider doing that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Barb.
Hey, good evening, Commission
Yes.
members. I just wanted to provide a couple of points of information, just based on my history of working with various commissions in Albany. The question of an elected body, I think, would require a charter amendment. That's a very complicated process, which requires an election in and of itself. So I know you're not leaning in that direction, but I just want, and it's not impossible to do, but it will slow things down because you'd have to wait for the next election. Council would have to approve an item, et cetera. I heard the other evening some questioning about whether a commission, because it's a commission, it doesn't have independent authority. Because commissions only make recommendations to council. That's not true entirely. There are several commissions that have independent authority. Planning and zoning has independent authority over construction approvals. And Park and Rec has independent authority over the removal of trees. So it's not unprecedented for a commission to have some areas of independent authority aside from making recommendations. And I just want to applaud you guys for taking the higher ground here, moving on, trying to respond to legitimate questions. I think you're doing an excellent job. I think the majority of the council wants to support you. I'd be very much surprised if that's not true. And if they didn't before, I think they will now. I think some of them may have been a little scared about some of these issues. I thought the staff report might have contributed to that because it was not in any way positive and supportive of this motion. But I think you're moving in the right direction, and I think the council will support you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comment. Is that it? And I believe that's it. Okay, I'll bring it back on this side and we'll go ahead and finalize it. Are there any other suggested language or changes? Member Hamby, your hand is up. Go ahead, please.
I appreciate Mr. Grossman's comments, and I wonder if we could add that to the memo, that this would not be unprecedented in the city, that there are commissions with independent authority. And perhaps in that line can make it abundantly clear that that is the intention with this particular commission.
All right, thank you. Next, Member Wayne, your hand's up.
I wanted to follow up on one of the public comment, which is about including youth in the commission. And I feel like the Board of Education might not be the most, if the council does decide to act on that, the Board of Education might not be the best avenue to ask for a youth participant, because to my knowledge, the people that do interact with the Board of Education represent a very narrow portion of the youth at the high school. And I'm not gonna go into too much details right now, but if we do decide on to act upon including a youth, I feel like we should have another conversation about how that youth should be elected or appointed. That's it.
Anyone, go ahead.
So my understand, I'm not going to answer that question. I'll let you guys answer that. I like that we're going to continue with the name public safety. That was the other comment I forgot to say earlier, because if, let's say this memo passes, we still have room to add whatever the public safety subcommittee is going to add. And so I'd like for that to stay as the name rather than what might have been inferred or as a suggestion, which is a police specific accountability commission.
Any other comments? Member Johns, go ahead, please.
Yes, there were two items that I'm not sure we fully addressed in pulling together the language. And those are investigative powers and subpoena powers. The research that I've done indicates that without those two items or those two tools, any kind of review or accountability board is toothless. And I think we do not want to create a toothless body, because that's just going to become another source of irritation and dissatisfaction for Albany residents. So I'm not sure how or whether the entire task force wants to include that or amend that language, but I did want to make that observation and suggestion.
Thank you, Member Johns. Leon, go ahead.
Great points. And I was wondering if there's a way that we can add those as future placeholders while we do some more research. So that what we have here is, it's like pieces of at least the accountability section. You know, I know from the budget subcommittee, we're gonna probably make some recommendations, including principles around budget. And so that's what I'm just wondering, if there's a way that we could say, this is kind of the outline with these are the different parts, but we're gonna have some placeholders for whether it's additional principles, there's future work to be done, but in some ways, giving like bite-sized pieces for us to have the city council address at one time might be just easier to digest.
Member Haverty?
Yeah, I appreciate Member Jones' comment, and I wonder if, because I just want to make this as explicit as possible and as clear what our intention is. If we could put something, you know, in the memo that says, you know, without the following, and that would include subpoena powers, without independent authority, without a few of like the non-negotiables, that there is no, then it is no longer a meaningful oversight committee. Because my concern is it's certainly politically suicidal for them to say we want no oversight. So they will pass something, but my concern is that it might get, you know, there will be changes, and we're leaving, you know, the memo leaves it open for the city attorney to make amendments as necessary. And I recognize that. I'm an attorney. I get that is necessary. But I think I want to make it like so, abundantly clear that, okay, you can remove such and such and render it toothless, as Member Johns says, but I want it written there that that is what you will be doing. Because otherwise I think it'll be too easy for it to be spun as progress when, as others have pointed out, it actually can just create more paperwork and also allows them, something to hide behind. So we definitely, I think we should err on the side of being really clear that there are certain things that if this body doesn't have those powers, it really would be better off not existing.
Thank you. Member Jones, did you have another comment or suggestion? I see your hands up, or is that from before?
That's from before, but I would like to thank the last speaker, because I do believe that the stronger we make the language and the plainer we make the language, the more incumbent it becomes upon the city council to just state their intention, whether that's to create a paper tiger or not, clearly. And the community can then respond to that. So I agree that we should take as strong a position as possible down the line.
Could I sort of show a space where we might be able to think about a sentence that would help? Would that be okay?
That would be great if you could share your screen, and then we can finalize the document to move on to the next item. Thank you.
I think you all can see. So this is under the resolution. This is the main, so this is, if you go through page 1 of the resolution for the September one, this is the the one that spells out the power of the consultant. I assume that that's where would be a likely place to sit our explanation. So I was looking at, we state what the commission can do, that they'll be consulted on the selection of the consultant, which I know isn't a lovely phrase, but I think it is important to make sure they've got plan on the scope of work, that the process is independent, and that this might be a place where we say how we want to say this. So the consultant shall have investigative powers. And what is a language we can use about subpoena powers that those of y'all with knowledge of the law think could seem meaningful. I'm not sure who in the city of Albany actually has subpoena powers. In other words, does the city council have subpoena powers to delegate, even if it chose to? And how can we write this in a way that would seem like it would be clear what it means, right? Because we want to have a strong statement, and we also want it to be something that people can carry out. So could it be that they have investigative powers and the commission shall be empowered to call upon the council to issue subpoenas if the council has that power? I just don't know a way around how to state where we think the subpoena power lies that can be granted. So if anybody has suggestions here, I'm glad to type away.
And you can just unmute yourself and state suggestions if you have any.
Well, I would suggest at that sentence, just saying the consultant shall have independent, investigative, and subpoena powers.
Greg, that may be a government code section for that. I'm trying to see. But if you want to leave it like that for now, so we can move on, that's fine. If anyone have any objections or other suggestions, Member Hamity, go ahead.
Thanks. Sorry, for some reason I wanted to paste this into the chat, but I'm having all these technical difficulties. But basically, the California Supreme Court in 2000 specifically held that cities as legislative bodies can issue subpoenas so long as it's authorized by ordinance or similar enactment, serves a valid legislative purpose, and the witness or material subpoenaed is pertinent to the subject matter of the investigation. So basically, we should be able to, we should have the authority. I imagine I don't know, I'm not familiar with Albany's code, but assuming the city has that authority, then I would think, as you know, the city could then declare through that this would be one of the ways in which they can issue that subpoena. I will try to, I mean, I think we could just, that we'll have subpoena powers consistent with California law or something along those lines. And then, yeah, you know, the city attorney can massage it, but it wouldn't be totally out of left field for a city to have, or a city body to have subpoena power.
If anybody has other suggestions, we can take them, and if not, I'm glad to have that. Member Johns, does that addition of consistent with California law satisfy you?
Yes, that makes perfect sense.
I'm just going to clarify a phrase I added before in the previous section. Anything else?
Anything else you want to scroll up?
Oh, sorry. I picked exactly
okay.
the wrong time to stop sharing. I know it's irritating when the share screen takes over. So these parts, if there's no red, nothing has been changed from the one that was submitted to the task force. So it's really page 2. We've added this section on the consultant shall have independent investigative and subpoena powers consistent with California law. We've added below the phrasing, which I just tinkered with a tiny bit, status of whether live in Albany or not. I wish I had a more eloquent way to say that, but it's fine. And if not an Albany resident, county of residence, which seemed to speak to our questions about what we, you know, that Chair Dosty raised. I'm going to want to put semicolons in place of these commas because this is a longer phrase with internal commas. We've added the sections on make recommendations to council in these 2 places. To be clear, that's part of the powers. And we've added the receive briefings, including department structures and staffing under briefings. And I think that is what we have added to the resolution. Some of these, you know, on the memos, I'll work to change them, or we can all, as a subcommittee, work to change the memo in between now and when it goes forward to council, and we'll need to make it fit the memo style, which I didn't fit before, but can make sure that that it fits the memo style.
All right, before we wrap this up and move to the next item, is there any other comments, suggestions that we need to consider with the document? Everything looks good. And so the subcommittee, if you can just kind of give us an overview of the timeline and when you think you would have this updated and possibly for the next council meeting.
I think my request, and I think this is in keeping with Member Locke and Member Johns, is that we would ask to send this to council for the next available council agenda. You know, we've got the updated resolution, which you'll, you know, have seen just now. And then, you know, the task of fitting the memo to it is something that we can accomplish, I think, between now and when we need to meet, you know, when we need to meet any agenda deadline. I do think there is, you know, it's important to respond to council's previous concerns and to see if it's possible to aim for a resolution at the next possible meeting, which I think is in early October. So my goal would be to sort of move back while there's a lot of engagement with the issue.
And do we need to do a vote for that to be brought up to the next council, or just want to make sure we're in compliance?
Yeah, it'd be helpful if you do a motion and vote.
All right.
But just so you know, for October 4th, usually item needs to be in by this Friday.
September 24th?
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, including the supporting memo. Okay, we'll get it done.
Can I get a motion? Member Law? Member Downs? Can I get a motion? So, okay, go ahead. Sorry, Member Lynn, go ahead.
So I want a motion for this to move forward with the move forward to the city council.
I second.
Second the motion.
Can we go ahead and get a vote in, please? A roll call, sorry.
Member Dostie?
Yes.
Member Downs?
Yes.
Member Gary?
Yes.
Member Hamady?
Yes.
Member Jones?
Yes.
Member Leung?
Yes.
Member Locke?
Aye.
Member Newton? He says yes. Member Oliver?
Yes.
Member Wong?
Yes. Yes.
Member Wright?
Yes.
All right. We'll go ahead, welcome Member Wright. We'll go ahead and move down to item number 6.2, which is the budget subcommittee report. Anyone from that subcommittee would like to speak at this time?
Yes, I'd like to speak. The budget subcommittee would like to make a update and recommendation. We'd like to propose a change for a name based on the scope of the information that we need. It's to change our name to a budget and data subcommittee of the community task force on policing. The reason why we're doing this is because we'd like to be able to gather the appropriate information so we can get a lot of facts as we present it to the committee. The other thing we'd like to do is, let me read what we actually wrote. The rationale is to, given the outcome of the committee task force on policing, the subcommittee wants to support open communication pathway between the community and the police beyond the issue of budget by gathering data and community input on perspective of policing and public safety. The other thing we'd like to add is we'd like to request 2 public records. Request police budget presentation, which requests the police from the police department present an overview of the budget by addressing the following: an overview of the current 2022 and 2023 budget and its actual expenditure and revenue source. A breakdown of staffing and overtime use over the last 3 years. Disclosure of the number of settlement and costs if there's any. A rationale for an increase in the budget allocation from fiscal year 2019 to 2020, where the actual was $5.9 million in actual expenditure, to 2021, where the approved budget was $7.8 million. Given the fact that this year, we also have a deficit of $4.7 million. We just like to get a better understanding of what the process is there. A scope of revenue and agreement with the Kensington Police Department. and also the percentage of call that requires a sworn officer. And we just basically want to look at the overall and see where all the resources are being used. We'd like to request also from the police data representation. We'd like to request the police department to present an overview of the existing data, including an overview of stop data collection and analysis, number of 5150 calls, and we leave this open last several years, maybe over the last 2 years. A breakdown of call and police response duration over the past several years. A total number of complaints and breakdown of complaints by category. We understand that some of this, there's going to be information that we can't get, but we'd like to make sure that we get it on record that we're asking for these information as part of us making up our decision as part of the budget committee. And what we're looking at as a budget committee that we talked about often is that we're not here to reduce the police budget. We're not here to change how they do things, but we're here to make sure we look at how the money is being spent. Can we use the funding that is being allocated to the police department in a more efficient way, so we can use our police department as a leading example for other police departments around. And the last and final thing that we'd like to address is on the data part. Beyond asking for public record, we'd like to develop a community survey to guide the public, to gauge public opinion on safety issue. We'll be meeting monthly to gather questions to make sure that we are operating with the guidelines of the city and the city office. I think that our main goal is to move towards having the budget committee fully support the community as a customer, and that's the reason why we're presenting these points.
Any members want to speak on this or have any questions? All right, I'll open it up for public comments, if any. Looks like we have one. Go ahead, Julie.
Hi, thank you. I had a question earlier, then this is perfect because it fits right in. In the previous document, I didn't get my hand up soon enough, that Member Downs was going over, it said make recommendations on the police budget after hearing from the city staff or something like that. And I was wondering how you could make recommendations after just hearing from the city staff, because it seems like what you hear from the city staff might not be everything that you need to hear. So I really appreciated that this budget proposal includes looking more deeply and getting a sense of what's actually happening. The number of calls that require a sworn officer seems to me like a great idea. Like, did it really require a sworn officer? What other resources are being used? Again, a really great idea. And surveying the community. So I really appreciate all of those. I think that it's easy, or maybe not easy, but it's awkward not getting information just from the city staff, but I think it would be misleading. And I just wanted to mention too that there was a misunderstanding earlier when I asked the question about the demographics. I was asking about the community members who are being stopped by the police officers and not by the police, about the police officers themselves. So I really like this budget proposal. Thank you.
All right. We'll go back and bring it to the task force. I'll start with Chair Dossi first. Go ahead.
I have two things. One is self-reporting is always going to be biased, right? And so receiving what the police are saying is necessary, and what they're saying, right? It's helpful. It's a first step. We need the justifications that they're giving out, but then we have to be able to look be on them. And I'm not 100% sure of how to do that. But I do think that specifically, I love asking about requires a sworn officer, and then asking about how they're deciding that on each one, I think, or in each category is really important. So not just you get to decide what requires a sworn officer, because they'll say all traffic stops do, because what if someone has a gun? And that's, we can disagree with that, basically. So breaking that out, I think, is important. And maybe you were already doing that, I'm not sure. And the other question was, you spoke about wanting to support the efficiency of the police department. Specifically, it sounded like maybe versus, I mean, I'm on the Reimagining Public Safety Subcommittee, and we didn't pull together a report. Sorry, I did a lot of coming up with proposals, and then I think we got bogged down in refining them and sourcing citations. But the synergy between us, right, as the Reimagining Public Safety coming up with ideas of, well, we could look at moving these duties away from police into a different form of public safety. And then the budget committee being like, well, this much money should go to this form of public safety. And then maybe that can be police, or maybe that can be what the Reimagining Subcommittee suggests. Basically the timing right. And I want to make sure that that we get our stuff to you soon enough, that when you're making budget recommendations, it involves our proposals. And so we have to be a little faster. But I just wanted to, because I heard you say about the police department specifically, and I don't know if that was like super conscious. And basically I'm bringing up is part of your conceptualization of the budget subcommittee's duties to allocate to areas that aren't that don't have to be through the police necessarily, or how are you thinking about that?
Well, one of the things we looked at was the police actual versus, and maybe Yvette can help me clarify this. I'm going from memory here. Is they had a 30%, I think a 33%, a 35% increase from their actual to their budget. Where's that money going? Why is that approved, or why is that even requested? And so if at the same time the cities run a deficit of $4.7 million, why are we asking for that increase, and where's that increase going? And for us, because we're standing on the outside, what we're asking, our approach is, give us what you have. Let us understand your thought process, rather than going and say, these are the things we're looking at and we'd like to change them. We're saying, let us understand where you're coming from, because there may be another way of looking at it. And I know that police officers and all over the country is sensitive about, defunding the police. And we want to just say, we're not in that space. We're in a space where if the budget is going to be allocated, that money is in a huge pot. How do we use that fund? How do we want to understand how that fund is being used? And from a citizen point of view, do we need to spend a sworn police officer at X amount of dollars for training and salary to go to a dog bite? Could we use another resource? Could we and from this group together, we can reform this whole policing body to make it actually the benchmark. We have X amount of officers last year. No, we have Y, and we have X amount of safety officers that doesn't do the actual police work that needs someone to be sworn in. And we may have X amount of counselors, but they're still under this umbrella based on this budget that's out there. We don't know. And if we sit back and make recommendation without gathering knowledge from the source, then we'll be operating blindly. And what we'd like to do is just get data, as much data as possible. And we know, again, that asking someone for data who may or may not be protective of their information is problematic. But we're gonna take what they gave us. And from we're operating that we're also citizens, and when we ask for these things, we know there's limitation of what we're gonna get. But whatever we get, we will deal with it. But we want to put it on record that we're asking for these things. And if they do not have it, or they decide to delay to give it to us, we ask for these information so we can make an educated decision as we rank recommendation going forward.
Thank you. Member Long, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks so much. I think what I want to put on record is to say that at the last meeting, I guess it was in July. I'm forgetting. It was July. I did ask for a budget presentation from the police, and so I just want to put that on record. And so when I noticed that there wasn't going to be a presentation from the police on the budget, what we are asking officially for is public records request. And specifically for our charge is the budget. And I don't know if we need to have some kind of a motion to pass around changing our name. What our intent is that we want to increase just information and data gathering on both ends. And what we're asking for from the police is just give us a breakdown of the budget. Now, the budget moving forward from the current fiscal year moving forward, it doesn't seem as high of an increase, but the year before it was extraordinarily high. And so given that the city council in their strategic plan has not only wanting public transparency, but then also I think I'm forgetting the exact values, but something around financial, accountability, that this seems like a discrepancy to me. And so that's why we're asking from the budget subcommittee piece, we're asking for a budget presentation from the police at the next meeting specifically. And we'd also like the data presentation as well, because if we aren't able, it's one thing to say in your 2019-2020 fiscal year report, end of year report, that one of your accomplishments was to establish RIPA data system, and yet there is no way to look at the data and actually pull out the data for a community task force on policing to look at the data, then what are we doing here? So I do want to officially, I think our group really wanted to officially ask for that information for the October meeting.
Okay. And and thank you so much. I think that budget presentation would have to come from the financial director. She should be able to break down and answer the questions from that. And I think, like you said, the data should be able to come from the police department to provide that information. So
yeah, I mean, I would love for it to be co-presented by this police chief and the finance administrator. I think the other thing that I heard member Dossi say is if you look at, for instance, the city of Oakland, when they're reimagining public safety, they had a budget committee that looked at if we were to spend 50%, reinvest 50% of the police department budget, it would be redirected to reimagining public safety. I think right now we are in this first stage of of our work is just to even ask for the very bare bone basics. And then we're going to look at some other proposals, but I'd love for us to, I don't know how many people are on your subcommittee, but if it's under 7, I'd love for our subcommittees to work together so that we can actually coordinate what we're requesting with the city council.
Any other comments?
Oh, sorry, can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, if it's under 7, then I'd like the email, because I don't actually even have emails for all of you.
Okay. And then to clarify what Chair Dossi said, Chair Dossi did present documentation to be structured in a way that could be presented to the task force. But yeah, we think we just got a little behind, but hopefully the next meeting will be prepared and be able to share the information that we have. And then you're saying, from what I'm understanding, is our next agenda in October, you would like the presentation for future agenda items from the financial director only on police budget and the data information from the police department. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there any other comments before we adjourn? And is there anything you need to add or that we need to do to make that happen for our next meeting?
Do we need a motion from member? Oh, I'm sorry, Chair Dosti.
That's not. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Fine. I was just going to say we have 4 members of our subcommittee, including Mayor Gary. And I think you have 3, so 3 and 4 would make 7, which would.
But I can step out, so you guys can do the work.
Right.
So I would be.
3. Okay. So yeah.
And do we need questions before we adjourn?
No, my question was just whether I see. It was just whether Member Leong needed a resolution. We needed a motion from us for any of the pieces. If so, I'm glad to.
Correct. If we need any, if there needs to be a motion.
We were just saying we wanted to change our name to the Budget and Data Subcommittee, and mainly so that we can also start working on even some survey questions to ask for on the community side around their perspectives of policing and public safety.
Your members are welcome to make a motion.
Okay.
I want to move that what Member Leong said, we make our motion, because I'm worried I'm gonna stumble on it. Do you want to just make the motion, Member Leong, and I'll second it? So I don't want to mess something up.
Sure. I move that we change our name from the Budget Subcommittee to the Budget and Data Subcommittee, and mainly to with the charge of looking at supporting open communication pathways between the community and police by gathering data and community input on perspectives of policing and public safety beyond the issue of budget.
You get a second? All right, let's go get a roll call in.
Member Dosti,
Abstain.
Member Downs,
Yes.
Member Gary,
Yes.
Member Hamady,
Yes.
Member Johns,
Yes.
Member Leong,
Yes.
Member Locke,
Yes.
Member Newton, and Member Newton votes yes. Member Oliver,
Abstain.
Member Wong,
Yes.
Member Wright.
Yes.
All right, if there's nothing further, we do have our next agenda item to be presented in October and requested. And with that said, I would like to thank everyone for your time again to meet and confer and We'll see you in a month. Have a good evening.
Have a good evening.
Thank you all.